So you see, I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. He has good instincts. He does the right things initially, some of the right things, but he doesn't follow through. And why doesn't he follow through? I mean, this is a tough-minded businessman, right? Well, he is about money, but he has no knowledge, no experience about argumentation of detailed law and conservative issues. He's never argued them. Never in his life has he ever had an argument for conservative things to another person. How do you expect to go up to these globalist advisors and talk them out of what they're trying to tell you? I mean, it takes real experience to do that. He's just unprepared to be president of the United States. And so what does he do? He turns to advisors. But all his advisors have been purged of anyone who knows anything about the Constitution or anything but Main Street. For example, who did he put in as director of personnel? Johnny DeStefano. Johnny DeStefano was the former longtime aide to House Speaker John Boehner. And you know who John Boehner was, betrayal John Boehner, who never did a conservative thing in his life. Former Republican National Committee chairman staffer. So that's like Reince Priebus you bring in after you become president to pick your staff in the White House. Trump was unprepared. How do you pick 4,000 people to staff the White House West Wing? When you don't know any conservatives, you palled around with Hillary Clinton all your life. You know, other movie stars and prostitutes and other things. Now, I'm not a never Trumper, never have been. I was optimistic, I was hopeful that Trump would do the right thing. His rhetoric was fine. I was always skeptical. I said, look, we'll see if he can follow through, because I know how powerful the deep state is, and I know how powerful the entrenched forces of Congress are. But he's been very disappointing in the lack of staying power, the lack of pushing back when he turns around so quickly. Nothing is more symptomatic than what happened in North Korea. North Korea is an existential threat to the United States. Afghanistan is not. Syria is not. Iraq is not. Iran is not. North Korea is. Russia is. China is. And you know, he says, I'm going to solve this problem one way or the other. It's either going to be doing it or I'm going to do a military solution. So he gets together with Kim Jong-un in June in Singapore and has a love affair with Kim Jong-un. He just wows him with, you know, and that's because when Xi Jinping, China, came to Mar-a-Lago and met with Trump, he just poured on the flattery. Trump melted like butter and came out saying, what a wonderful person Xi Jinping is. What do you mean, wonderful person? You know what the gulags in China are like? I mean, this is a communist country. This is something that has many, many millions of prisoners. The abortion rate, you know, they used to go through, not abortion, but the one-child policy. I mean, this is a criminal country. And he says, what a wonderful person he is. It tells you a lot about Donald Trump as a poor judge of character. How do you get to be a poor judge of character? How do you get to be a good judge of character? By listening to the nervous feelings of conscience that come, that will give you warning signals when you meet somebody that's shifty. You know, the little warning bells go off, watch out for this guy. But you see, when you dedicate your life to disregarding conscience in your moral life, you're immoral and you push that signal, you get penalized. You don't get the signals before, and your mind becomes callous to those things. You don't deserve the kinds of promptings. That's why he keeps making mistakes. He's met with Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, arch-globalist, 4 times in the White House, and thinks he's a wonderful person. He met with Obama right after he was elected and came out saying he's a wonderful person. And said wonderful things about Hillary Clinton, lock her up Clinton. Now, to his credit, he did go to his Justice Department or his attorneys and said, I want Hillary Clinton investigated and prosecuted. And what did they tell him? His own attorney said, oh no, you can't do that. The Justice Department is independent of the executive. That's a lie. The Justice Department is part of the executive branch, and he is the chief prosecutor. He can direct the Justice Department. He can direct them. But you know, only when a Republican's in office do they tell a Republican president, no, you can't direct. They're independent. But when a Democrat is in there, they're like hand in glove. Obama calls Eric Holder, and you know, and he does what he says, and the press never says nay, never says it's independent. It's just it's a facade only for Republicans. So His own attorneys talked him out of it and saying, you can't direct them. You have to wait. Of course, Rod Rosenstein was running the Justice Department, so they knew that nothing would happen. And then they said, if you insist, they'll get you for obstruction of justice. They always keep throwing that at him. How is wanting to prosecute someone for a crime obstructing justice? It's the Justice Department that's obstructing justice. It's Rod Rosenstein who refused multiple subpoenas to give documentation to the House Intelligence Committee on the memo that was telling who was the FBI spy in the Trump administration and what he was telling. Now, I'll tell you the reason why I think the memo could not be released and was redacted is because the spy's still in there. And if Rod Rosenstein were to unredact that, Trump and everybody else would know who the spy was. Well, there's actually multiple spies. So this is a real rat's nest that Trump has inherited, but to a large extent it's his own fault, because one, he goes in unprepared. Number two, he can't tell black from white, who's good and who's bad. He just doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have a good sense of conscience from chronic betrayals of conscience. He doesn't have the Lord helping him to perceive these things because he's not a righteous person. Does that mean I would vote for a Mitt Romney or the mainstream people trying to bend over backwards and please him? No way. I still would rather live with my hope that Donald Trump will do the right thing. But this much is what I'm here to tell you tonight. You know, there's a real problem with the Trump supporters. They tend to get very defensive when you criticize Trump, even when you do it on principle. And it's almost impossible to get rid of the hope inside that he's going to save us. I think it's secretly because Trump supporters don't want to prepare for the worst. They don't want to prepare for what's coming. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hazard. You know, it's a very dark picture of losing liberty, of admitting that there's secret combinations in charge of them and that you can't get them out, and that we're going to have war. And so they'd rather go on year after year hoping that Donald Trump is going to save them. But I'm here to tell you, I've lost any hope that Donald Trump is going to save this nation or turn anything around. At best, he's going to continue to slow them down, give us a little more time. But that's the best he's going to do. He's going to slow them down, and he has slowed them down a little bit. Except in a few areas. In foreign policy, he hasn't slowed them down a whit. He's bought into every false intelligence about Syrian chemical weapons that they've thrown at him. He's bought into the entire mantra about Iran being the biggest sponsor of terror in the world. Iran isn't the biggest sponsor of terror in the world. The United States is. With its whore, Saudi Arabia, who's feeding and funding a lot of these terrorist organizations. And Israel is deeply involved. The Mossad does all of the training of the terrorist leaders, because they are the best at infiltrating Arab countries. They don't do it with Israelis, they do it with Israeli Arabs. Arabs that live within Israel, they train highly to infiltrate, because Arabs can infiltrate Arabs. And they go, and so the terrorists don't know that their leaders are Mossad trained, that are taking orders from the US and British intelligence. They just know that they've been riled up about, kill the West and do terrorism. But the leaders know. And that's why in every single terrorist attack, whether it's Mosul, when you go after ISIS, or whether it's Raqqa, they saved the ISIS leaders. They left a big sector in Mosul open so that ISIS could escape out that sector and go to Raqqa. And when Raqqa fell, guess who saved ISIS? The United States paid for about 50 or 60 semi-trucks driven by Arab drivers to go into Raqqa and take out ISIS, their families, and their heavy weapons. And where did they go? They reintegrated them into the Syrian rebel forces that the U.S. is publicly backing. That's where they came from originally. U.S. and British intelligence came in and basically said, you guys are now ISIS. Take about half of them, they're going to get funding priority. Now they didn't tell them, dressed in my camouflage uniform with the U.S., these were Israeli, Arab, terrorist leaders telling them, we're now going to be ISIS and this and that. And that's how ISIS was created. How else do you get the largest terrorist organization in the world that comes into being within 6 months? Out of nowhere. And has suddenly 50,000 people. You don't do that by recruitment, by normal and training. You do that by simply taking existing and separating them and now give them a name change. That's how all, remember everything was Al-Qaeda before 9/11? Or through 9/11, etc. And all of a sudden it was ISIS and Al-Qaeda wasn't even heard of anymore. Now Al-Qaeda's coming back. Why? Because ISIS has to be defeated. They're reintegrated back into the Syrian rebel forces, so now Al-Qaeda's on the rise again. This is all provoked. This is all engineered. This is what you're dealing with. It's very sophisticated. If Trump knew only one thing, if I were to sit down with him, even for 5 minutes, and say, one thing you need to know is that the deep state created ISIS and runs terrorism around the world with the help of Saudi Arabia that you are supporting. And you're supporting Saudi Arabia to kill Yemenis, and you're responsible for that. But it wouldn't do any good because he'd be very defensive. It's very hard to tell a very strong ego person what's, that he's been snookered, and he really has.